1962, and Arnold Palmer's at the peak of his career, both in his playing ability but also his popularity.
Arnold Palmer was playing at Oakmont. Of course, he had played many times since he grew up in Latrobe, a few miles away. He was everybody's favorite to win the U.S. Open.
The crowd was always something that spurred me on, and Pittsburgh was my town.
Jack Nicklaus, he's got the crew cut, wearing the J.C. Penney outfit. He was the upstart, the fat boy from Ohio State.
The fans were boisterous, and they were insulting to Jack. He never heard a thing he said.
I sort of felt going into Oakmont that was my tournament. I didn't care whether it was Arnold Palmer or anybody else. I'm a young kid, 22 years old, with blinders on. I had one thing in mind: win that golf tournament.
The origins of greatness are often hard to define. Is there one day on a calendar that can be circled, or a place on a map that cries out, here's where it all began? For Jack Nicklaus, finding that singular moment of promise fulfilled goes back half a century to a Sunday afternoon in June on a golf course just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was there that the sport's rising young star stared down an American legend to win the first of his record 18 professional major championships and signaled the beginning of one of the most enduring rivalries in sports. Jack Nicklaus was not favored to win the 1962 U.S. Open at Oakmont. Even though he believed it was his turn to take the championship. Nicklaus was barely 22 years old. A former amateur champion, yes, but in his first 6 months as a professional, he had yet to win a tournament. And the toughest test in golf is not usually where a rookie captures his first title. The 62 Open was supposed to be Arnold Palmer's to win, with the championship being played an hour from his blue-collar birthplace of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. It was set up to be a coronation for the king, a swashbuckling, charismatic hometown hero with a homemade swing.
He didn't look like what most people thought of as a golfer in those years. Golfers were older. You know, the great golfers in those years of the 50s were Ben Hogan, Sam Snead. All of a sudden, here was Arnold Palmer. This was somebody different. He looked like an athlete. He looked like a halfback. He looked like a boxer.
He looked like a guy who worked in a steel mill. And the way he played golf, he didn't have the classic swing of Sam Snead. He wasn't a textbook golfer. He looked like somebody who might play golf once a month on Saturday.
Oh, his golf was flawed many times. You know, he didn't have a pretty swing. He lunged at the ball. Nevertheless, it was a violent swing, and that attracted you too. If you saw Palmer 300 yards away hitting a golf ball, when you saw the swing, you knew it was.
First time I saw Arnold, he was hitting these big arms and he was hitting this ball with this unusual follow through. And I saw him pick up the grass and windy day and he threw it up in the air and he didn't even look. And I said, well, why you do that? He said, all the good players do it, so I do it. But no, the minute I saw him hit the ball, I said, wow, this guy, you know, he had that charisma.
Nobody matched Arnold's charisma. Arnold just happened to be there at the right time, and that little hitch of the pants and the flick of the hair and the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He was a blue-collar player in many ways, the common man's guy. He could always figure out how to make it happen. And he did make it happen. He willed the ball into the hole, and the people willed the ball in the hole with him. Growing up and playing, yeah, I mean, I was a fan too.
The brash and fearless Palmer was more than a great golfer. He was the first superstar of the sports television age, a cultural icon with a worldwide army of fans.
The crowd was always something that spurred me on. When they got excited and started rooting real hard, it seemed like I started playing a little better, and that was one of the things that I enjoyed very much.
He was constantly recruiting for Arnie's Army in his own way. Palmer really played to the crowd. He worked the room. He always acknowledged people as he went down the fairways.
People seemed to like him, and I think they liked him because he seemed to like them. And the way he was warm with his galleries, with the fans, they knew that he was glad that they were around and rooting for him, and it worked both ways.
There's something distinctly human about it, and I also think there was something distinctly American about it that at the time people really believed in.
And a magnificent shot by Arnold Palmer. He's got a chance to win the championship with his putt.
This is a generation that had lived through the Depression and lived through the difficulties of World War II, and they understood and they valued the spirit of a fighter. They understood what courage meant and what perseverance in the face of difficulty meant, and Arnold embodied all of that in the way he played the game. This is the time of television. When you think about Kennedy's election in 1960,
the Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
And how important a role television played in that. That similar sense pervaded the way that Arnold came through on a television screen.
Arnold Palmer started out high for the lead and has been playing brilliantly.
It was 1 to 10 million, not just 1 to 1. They were inspired by his play.
Arnold Palmer is the Masters champion of 1960. He has birdied the last 2 holes to catch and then move.
Palmer made golf. It was the Jupiter effect.
Outrageous golf that anybody has ever seen.
Everything lined up. Palmer came along at a time television came along and just captured everybody's imagination. By playing golf the way he did, everybody wanted to play golf. Arnold was the hero. He was the Notre Dame of golf, if you will.
Jack Nicklaus grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in post-World War II America. A typical suburban kid who loved all sports and embraced the competition that came along with it.
Jack's dad was a pharmacist. He owned several pharmacies in the Columbus area. It was a solid middle-class family. It certainly wasn't a privileged family. When he was 6 years old, his father took him to his first Ohio State football game. He fell kind of passionately in love with the idea of sports and competition. It just sort of fed something into his personality.
My father loved sports, and he introduced me to everything. He was not only my father, but he was my best friend. And you know, it was, hey, let's go out and throw a ball. Hey, let's go shoot hoops. And to me, golf was just another sport as I grew up.
Jack was an accomplished athlete, but he showed the most promise in golf. When he was only 10, he shot a 51 on the first 9 holes he ever played under the watchful eye of Jack Grout.
Jack Grout had a junior clinic Friday mornings, and he invited all the members' children to join him and a number of assistants on the practice tee. And of course, in those junior clinics was a young boy by the name of Jack Nicklaus. This young fellow was striking the ball 30 and 40 yards, much longer than the rest of the kids. So on the practice tee, I can remember Jack Grout saying, "Hit it high and hit it long for me, Jackie."
By the time he was 14 or 15 years old,
he was talked about in very special terms.
Jack was a really exceptional amateur player, and early on in his teenage years he started to compete in local events and state amateur events, but also professional events in the Ohio State Open. He starts to travel, he plays outside Ohio, he goes to his first USGA National Championship in 1955, meets Bob Jones.
Robert Tyre Jones was a golfing icon around the Nicklaus family. Jack's father, Charlie, idolized the greatest amateur of all time and had great respect for everything he stood for.
Charlie Nicklaus went to the 1926 U.S. Open at Scioto, where Bob Jones won, and was enamored with Jones, with his swing, with his game, but also with his disposition. Bob Jones became Charlie Nicklaus's hero. As soon as Jack starts to play, that same deep respect and admiration that his dad had, Jack had. Jack wanted to be the next Bob Jones, that he would beat Bob Jones' legendary amateur record.
When he first started playing as an amateur, I said, "Did y'all see this man, Jack Nicklaus?" He was 16, 17 years old then, a long hitter. And I mean a long hitter.
I played with him in Athens, Ohio, with Dow Finsterwald in an exhibition, and that was the first time I really met him.
They had a driving contest at the first hole at Athens, and it was 330 yards. Jack drove the ball past the first green. Arnold drove it on, but Jack drove it over that first hole, so the potential was seeable there.
I made the Walker Cup team. Oh my gosh, that's pretty neat. I must be one of the 12 best amateurs in the country, 1959.
The National Amateur Golf Championship is at stake in Colorado Springs, where an old veteran and last year's winner, Charlie Coe, meets the challenge of the teenager, Jackie Nicklaus, on the Broadmoor Country Club course. Nicklaus is a 19-year-old Ohio State junior. If he can pull it out today, he will be the youngest amateur golf champion in 50 years.
Later that year, I won the U.S. Amateur. I was ranked number 1. I said, "Gee, that's pretty flattering for a 19-year-old kid." The next year, I finished second in the U.S. Open. Wow.
Nicklaus was actually leading the 1960 Open with 9 holes to play until Arnold Palmer put on one of his patented charges.
Then out of the blue comes a thunderbolt. Arnold Palmer, the Masters champion, starting the last round 7 strokes behind Suchak, puts on a blistering rally.
Palmer shot a final round 65 to beat Nicklaus by 2 strokes. And when Jack followed his second place finish at the Open with a second amateur title in 1961, he began to rethink his future.
I must be better at this game than I thought I was. I was playing the game recreationally, yet competing and doing very well. I said, so the only way that I can be the best is compete against the best and play against the best. And when you play, the only way you're going to do that is play professionally.
There weren't more than a couple of handful of players who could make a substantial amount of money playing professional golf. If you played professional golf back then, you either didn't have any other skills, or you just loved the game and loved to play. But Jack's options were a lot bigger than anybody who'd ever come along.
Jack had come to me and asked about Mark McCormick handling some of his business, and I said, "Certainly, Jack, I will help you do whatever you want to do."
As the head of the International Management Group, Mark McCormick had been successfully handling Arnold Palmer's business affairs for years.
This is the famous long ball that Arnold Palmer used to drive 346 yards to the green.
And he was just as certain Nicklaus had a bright economic future in golf. All he had to do was play well. Jack had tremendous confidence in his own ability and made his decision to turn professional after much soul-searching and some reassuring words from his father's hero, Bob Jones.
Bobby Jones encouraged me to remain an amateur. And I love the letter that he wrote me. He said, "Jack," he said, "you know, we haven't had an amateur in the game since I played." And he says, "I think it would be a great thing if you do do this, but I understand the temptations of and the desire to want to be the best at what you do, and the only way you play is professionally. So I turned pro. That was November. I remember the first event that I played was December 31st, Country Club in Miami, playing with Sam Snead. And I teed off the first hole. My first tee shot as a pro was a nice 3-wood off the tee, hooked right in the lake. So that was not a good start.
It didn't get much better for Jack at the 1962 LA Open, his first official tournament. He finished tied for last and took home just $33.33. But as his play gradually improved, so did his paychecks, thanks in one tournament to some friendly advice from his future rival, Arnold Palmer.
The last round, I'm paired with Arnold. I'm not really in contention to win the tournament. Arnold's leading by a mile. And he came to me, put his arm around my shoulders. We were walking off the 17th green. He said, okay, now, just take it easy, be calm. You birdie the last hole, you can finish second by yourself here. He says, let's just play it smart. He says, you can do that. Which I thought was an awfully nice gesture for here's the guy that's the top of the game to come along, take this young rookie under his arm and say, you know, hey, you can do this. So I birdied the last hole, I finished second. I think I won $2,300 or something like that for second place.
But after 17 starts and the Open at Oakmont on the horizon, Jack Nicklaus was still in search of his first professional victory. Even though Jack Nicklaus finished in the top 4 in both the 1960 and 61 U.S. Open championships as an amateur, most of the hype surrounding the 1962 Open focused on the undisputed king of golf, Arnold Palmer.
You come into the Open in 1962 and Arnold Palmer's at the peak of his career, both in his playing ability but also his popularity. Starting with his winning the Masters in 1958, he goes on this incredible tear, winning more than 30 PGA events, winning major championships, doing it with an incredible sense of style.
And going into the Open at Oakmont, he'd won 6 tournaments that year.
Arnold's win at the 62 Masters came just 2 months before Oakmont, complete with typical Palmer theatrics.
People often say, what's the worst moment of your career in golf? And I never hesitate to say this because we're playing 3 holes left to go and we're on 16 and I hit first and I hit it about 12 foot from the hole. Really, I hit a beautiful shot and Arnold hit a lousy shot to the right, not even on the green. I said to my caddy, the unforgivable, I said, well, we've won.
Palmer has selected his wedge and he hits it.
And it came down there and I could still see it coming down flat out and it hit the flag and went in the hole.
Toward the hole, and in. Flagstick, and Paul Palmer has scored a birdie too. A near impossible shot here.
I tell you, it was quite a shock.
2 months later, with the Open on his doorstep, the press had its hero. All it needed was a foil.
Arnold Palmer was on the cover of Newsweek going into the U.S. Open. To be charitable, Jack had a lot of baby fat on him at that time.
He was the fat boy from Ohio State. He looked like some kid who was making his first Holy Communion.
Arnold Palmer was playing at Oakmont. Of course, he had played many times since he grew up in Latrobe a few miles away. I mean, Arnold Palmer not only was the sentimental favorite, he was in a sense the hometown favorite. He was everybody's favorite to win the U.S. Open. He was his own favorite to win the U.S. Open.
Going to Oakmont was something that I looked forward to with a great deal of anticipation, and my prime interest was winning the golf tournament.
He wanted to win there, and I remember it very well indeed. I mean, right in his own backyard, and I can remember it so clearly. He wanting to win that so badly, and every tournament you're playing you want to win, but he was really obsessed about winning there, and I can understand that.
Despite the different degrees of professional success Palmer and Nicklaus had achieved, Jack was surprisingly confident about his chances on the difficult and historic Oakmont layout.
I sort of felt going into Oakmont that that was my tournament, nobody else's. And I really liked Oakmont from the practice rounds. I said, this is going to be my week.
By the time the Open came to Oakmont in 1962, it already had a very long and very rich history when it came to USGA championships. Bob Jones won the U.S. Amateur, Tommy Armour winning the first U.S. Open there in 1927. In 1935, Sam Parks, a virtual unknown local, wins the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Hogan wins there in 53. When it was created by W.C. Phones and Henry Phones back in the turn of the century, it was designed to be the severest test of golf in the country. Its architecture is truly remarkable.
Oakmont's a unique course. Pennsylvania Turnpike runs right through the middle of it. It doesn't have any water hazards. And another unique aspect was the so-called church pews, bunkers that had sod, then sand, sod, then sand, sod, then sand. So that's why they call them the church pews. In 1962, that was the last year that they did this, they had these special rakes that they raked the sand in the bunkers. They had 4-inch tines. If you can think of a fork, every other tine is missing, and the groundskeeper would rake the sand and create a furrowed brow.
And they would do it in a perpendicular direction to most of the shots play. So inevitably, your ball would get in there. And the sand was a much muddier, firmer consistency, really river bottom sand that they got. And it really gets back to the concept that bunkers are hazard.
The fairways are reasonably narrow, the rough is treacherous.
When you think about legendary greens, from a design standpoint, a conditioning standpoint, a speed standpoint, you have to think about Oakmont Country Club. They have incredible undulations. These truly are the most interesting greens in the world.
The greens were so difficult. They were old-style greens. They didn't have a lot of humps and bumps, but they had a lot of tilt in them. And you put the speed on the tilt, it was pretty easy to putt right off a green. Hardly anybody had ever seen greens that fast and played greens that fast.
Very, very big and very, very slick. Very, very slick. In those days, we played a lot on Bermuda. And suddenly you got to this bent grass that was just mowed and rolled and kept a little dry, and it was just a complete different game.
I read a couple of articles in advance of the Open there that it was a badge of courage of the members of how fast the greens were, and I think some of the members were bragging that they had to slow up the greens for the U.S. Open. But yeah, the members played it faster than we did.
On June 14th, 1962, nearly 20,000 fans came to Western Pennsylvania to watch the 62nd U.S. Open Golf Championship. Palmer and Nicklaus were paired together in the first 2 rounds. And Jack got off to a fast start, making birdies on the first 3 holes. Palmer struggled, but regained his poise and went on to shoot an even par 71. Nicklaus cooled off and shot 72, and both trailed the first-round leader, Gene Littler, who had a 69. On Friday, Palmer shot a day's best 68 to tie for the lead with Bob Rosberg, while Nicklaus fired a 70 to remain in the hunt. With Palmer leading the tournament, his fans were given what they had come to see, if they could see at all.
They didn't have great viewing points all the time, so if you were standing in 3 deep or 4 deep, you had to have the periscope. As you looked around from the green, you could see them everywhere.
I was aware that the galleries were very large, probably as large as they've been in any golf tournament in the world that I had played in up until then. But it was Pittsburgh, and I had played in front of them all my life as a junior and as an amateur. Pittsburgh was kind of my town.
For the first 2 rounds, Arnie's Army had been especially vocal, cheering Palmer and heckling Nicklaus. Jack was more than an opponent. He was the enemy.
brought golf to the masses, and he brought steelworkers to a country club at Oakmont. Most of those fans hadn't been to many professional golf events in their lives. They were there to see Arnold Palmer win. That's what they wanted.
Palmer now had a chance to manufacture another of his miracle finishes, knowing he would win the Open with one final birdie.
You gotta think that Arnold's gonna pull some piece of magic out. You know, he's gotten to this point in the championship. It's his hometown. It's Arnold's moment.
Down the middle with his drive, Palmer, the fabulous finisher, used a 4-iron. He has played a magnificent shot, and it's stopping about 12 feet to the left of the cup. If he can hold this sliding uphiller, Palmer will win his second Open. As he walks up the home green, the most popular man in golf acknowledges the cheers of the gallery. Palmer gets set over the putt. Everything rides on.
Arnold's got himself in that perfect position. He's gotten the putt he's looking for on the final green to win the championship, and it just doesn't happen.
Palmer's final round 71 tied Nicklaus at 1 under par. After 36 holes on Saturday, Jack and Arnold would have to play another 18 on Sunday. A playoff would decide the Open. Unlike Palmer, who had the benefit of staying in his own bed throughout the championship, the playoff meant Jack and his wife Barbara would be spending another night in a local hotel, along with their young son Jackie, beginning a Nicklaus tradition where family was just as important as golf.
Jack had made a pact when he turned pro that he would never be gone longer than 2 weeks at a time. He said, "I refuse to have my children go to college and say, gee, I wish I'd known my dad." And believe me, they couldn't say that. He was really their best friend.
But having his young son along also presented Jack with his own unique off-the-course challenges.
Barbara and I traveled in a car with a porter crib in the back seat. And those days they didn't have disposable diapers. We had the pail of diapers, and the room and the car did not smell very nice.
On the morning of the playoff, Jack's mother took Jackie out of the room so Jack could get some rest. In the hallway, they ran into the singer Frankie Avalon, who was performing in the area.
Jackie was a projectile baby, and Jack's mother was evidently carrying him down the hall, and Jackie came out with one of those projectiles, and just as she's walking past Frankie Avalon, and he looks over and says, "Oh my gosh, the kid puked." And so we've laughed about that for years.
The Nicklauses have also laughed about the condition of Jack's clothes, especially his pants.
People will say, "Is Jack superstitious?" And I always laugh because, yes, he has a few superstitions, always has only 3 pennies in his pocket. And he had worn a white shirt and this particular pair of pants the 36 holes of the U.S. Open in '62.
There were a $12 pair of iridescent olive green, they had blue and green threads through them. And, you know, I played 36 holes in them. They were good luck. I just go wear them again on the next day, which I did. I mean, I think it's on Saturday night after that, I went over and just stood them in the corner, you know. And I think I had 20 shirts. They were all white, and I just sort of rotated the white shirts. If I played well in one, I wore the same pair of pants. I mean, I was a 22-year-old kid, you know.
Nicklaus may have had the wardrobe of a 22-year-old kid, but by the time he had played his way into the Sunday playoff, it was clear to his older competitors that he was talented far beyond his years.
He was one of the finest iron players that I had ever seen. He could hit a 1-iron and a 2-iron up in the air better than anybody I had ever seen then and now.
He was just unbelievable. I mean, people forget how strong he was. My waist measured just over 29 inches. His thigh measured 29 inches. wonder he hits it a long way. He's got two of these hanging right there.
He was longer than almost everybody, but he managed his length. Most players who can hit it that far get carried away with their own length. Jack manages himself around the golf course as well or better than anybody that I ever saw, other than maybe Ben Hogan.
In the 18-hole playoff on Sunday, it was the 32-year-old Palmer, not the 22-year-old Nicklaus, who had trouble managing his nerves. Arnie made 3 bogeys in the first 6 holes, leaving Jack with a 4-stroke lead after the 8th.
I don't think at that time anybody could intimidate him. So I think that there was an assumption that Arnold would have a charge. Arnie's army would lead him and follow him on his charge, and he would emerge victorious.
Palmer birdied the par 5 ninth to pick up a stroke. He followed with a 3 on the par 4 11. And another birdie on the par 5 12th. The charge was on.
We're on the short 13th now, and here comes Palmer's tee shot. It's to the right, but kicks off the bank onto the front part of this large green. Palmer now trails by only 1 shot after birdieing the 12th.
I was pressing then. I was pushing hard to try to catch up. I knew that I would have to get my putter working a little better.
But on 13, Palmer's try for a 3rd straight birdie came up 6 feet short, long enough to test his already shaken confidence. Arnold's 3rd 3-putt of the playoff and 10th for the championship left him 2 behind with 5 holes to play. Once again, his putting let him down.
I thought that having played there all my life and knowing the greens as I did, I felt like I would putt pretty well there. Well, that was the thing that took me down.
3-putting kills you. Well, Arnold just ruined himself with 3 putts. Remember, Arnold hit his greens. He just didn't do anything when he got there.
I putted rather poorly. Or maybe it was just the pressure of the Open. Or maybe it was the fact that I didn't have that smooth, silky stroke.
Jack played the same greens, and he only 3-putted 1 time in 90 holes. If you only 3-putted at Oakmont 1 time in 90 holes, you were doing a terrific job. And Jack was the guy who could do it.
And that was the difference in the whole championship. People, I don't think, give Jack enough credit for. Jack could be the greatest putter who ever lived.
For Nicklaus, the 13th hole turned out to be more than just a pivotal moment in the championship. Months later, when he watched the official Open film, Jack noticed something that would change his life.
Now, the 13th hole turned out to be one of the most interesting scenes to me in my entire life. It had nothing to do with the playoff. And I walked up with a cigarette hanging out of my mouth and tapped it in. And I looked at it and I said, now that is the worst example for youth as a role model as I've ever seen. I looked at that and I said, oh man, that's awful. I threw my cigarettes away. Matter of fact, I had a contract with L&M at the time. I sent them back their money. And I said, guys, I can't do this. This is just not what I should be doing. And never smoked another cigarette on a golf course the rest of my life.
With 5 holes left in the playoff for the 1962 U.S. Open, Jack Nicklaus led Arnold Palmer by 2 strokes. And when they each made par on the next 4 holes, the margin remained the same when they reached the 18th.
Arnold finds the fairway. It's a very nice drive down the right-hand side. He's down in a low spot on the fairway, but he's in a good position. At that moment, Jack finally shows some signs of the pressure. It's really his first bad drive of the day. Hits it into the left rough.
There was a little confusion with Nicklaus's lie. It was embedded just a little bit in a little bit of moisture, a little bit of mud.
You start to think, ooh, there's a possibility here. Jack makes bogey, Arnold makes birdie. Very reasonable to think that a 2-stroke swing could happen. Arnold then hits his approach shot fat.
He didn't hit that one well. He's pushed it out to the right, just short of the bunker.
Jack plays fairly safely.
Nicklaus, faced with a nasty lie in the rough.
I had a horrible lie. I just couldn't do anything with it. Anyway, I pitched it out short of the cross bunkers.
He has hit a wedge recovery back onto the fairway.
And then I knocked it on the green probably, I don't know, 12 feet, something like that.
With Nicklaus safely on the green in 3, Palmer needed a miraculous birdie chip to keep his championship hopes alive.
Let me tell you, Palmer didn't miss hitting that flagstick by much.
When Nicklaus ran his par putt several feet past the hole, Palmer still had a slim chance. But when his par putt went racing past the hole, the playoff was over, except for Arnold's conciliatory but erroneous gesture.
When Arnold struggles to get down, there's this wonderful moment where Arnold tries to concede the match to him.
Palmer then picks up Nicklaus's ball marker as an act of concession.
That was a no-no. Right, I remember that quite well. I conceded is what I did. I was beaten. What the hell? Wasn't any big secret.
However, something still remains to be done.
They said put it back because he has to finish up.
This is stroke play, and USGA officials advise Jack Nicklaus to hole out and complete an 18-hole score, as Palmer has done.
Joe Dye came over, no, you got to finish the round. So I had to go back and tap my ball in.
Certainly I was frustrated playing Oakmont and playing in front of a hometown crowd, and the things that I should have thrived on, I didn't. I went the other way. Very surprising and disappointing.
He went on to win majors that same year, but he never won a U.S. Open again.
One thing that not many people realize, that from 1960 to 1966, for Arnold shooting 3 less strokes, he would have won 4 U.S. Opens. He tied with Jack in 62, with Boris, and I think Jackie Cupid in 63, and then Billy Casper in 66. So there were 3 Opens that he tied for, and of course he won in 60. So from 60 to 66, he could have very conceivably won 4 Opens.
Arnold actually couldn't have been nicer, and put his arm around me as we walked off and congratulated me very nicely, and was very happy for me.
He did play well, and it was quite an accomplishment for a young man that was really fresh on the tour. I said, now that that young fella's out of the cage, he's going to be tough. Watch out for him. We knew then that Jack was going to be a great player. We just didn't know how great.
A half-century ago, on the rolling hills of Oakmont, golf's greatest rivalry was born. What began as a fierce competition on the course gave way to a mutual respect between 2 of golf's greatest icons.
Arnold's contribution to the game was fantastic. The whole tour and all the game of golf followed on Arnold's coattails. He brought millions of people into the game, and that's great. I was just a beneficiary of a lot of it.
I thought we were both very fortunate to be doing what we were doing. It was exciting, it was competitive, and it was fun. It was a competition it was a good competition. It was one that both of us wanted to win very badly. And Jack and I today are still very close friends, and the competition hasn't dwindled at all. It's still there, and it will be there as long as we live.
For Jack Nicklaus, the journey to 18 major championships began on a memorable afternoon in western Pennsylvania. Over the next 18 years, he would go on to win the championship 3 more times, along with Willie Anderson, Bob Jones, and Ben Hogan, one of only 4 players to win 4 U.S. Opens.
You know, I look back on it, and I look at the sequence of way things happen to me. I always felt like I wanted to keep climbing a mountain. And as long as you keep climbing that mountain, you know, as long as that mountain just keeps getting a little bit taller, and you just keep climbing, trying to get better. That was just one of my stepping stones to climbing up. It set up my career, no question about it. My first win, beating Arnold Palmer in a playoff. U.S. Open, not just a tournament, but the U.S. Open, to me is the #1 tournament in the world. And of course, the championship of my country. To have won the U.S. Open as my first championship as a professional